They've said it 1,000 times. It's better to be feared than loved. That cold-hearted phrase supposedly sums up Machiavelli's legacy and brands him as the original villain of ruthless leadership. But is that really what the man meant? Most people never read past that quote. They mistake it for a call to tyranny, a manifesto for cruelty. What they miss is the nuance, the brutal clarity about human nature that Machiavelli revealed, and the delicate balance he prescribed for true power. This phrase hides a deeper truth about loyalty, fear, respect, and the fragile nature of human bonds, a truth as relevant today as it was 5 centuries ago. In a world where leadership is constantly scrutinized, where power dynamics shift with every social media post, and where authority is questioned at every turn, Machiavelli's insights remain shockingly applicable. But before we can understand the true meaning of this infamous statement, we need to understand the man behind it, and the brutal world that shaped his thinking. Niccolò Machiavelli was no villain. He was a political realist, living in the brutal chaos of Renaissance Italy, a time when city-states rose and fell like empires in a game of chess, when betrayal was currency, and when a leader's life expectancy could be measured in months rather than years. Born in Florence in 1469, Machiavelli served as a diplomat and political advisor during one of the most turbulent periods in Italian history. He witnessed firsthand the fall of the Medici family, the rise and fall of the charismatic preacher Savonarola, and the constant threat of foreign invasion from France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire. His writings reflect a mind grappling with unstable power, shifting alliances, and the constantly looming threat of violence. Machiavelli wasn't theorizing from an ivory tower. He was documenting survival strategies from the front lines of political warfare. When he wrote The Prince in 1513, he had just been imprisoned, tortured, and exiled from Florence after the return of the Medici family to power. This wasn't an academic exercise. It was a desperate attempt to regain favor, to demonstrate his value, and perhaps to warn future leaders about the mistakes he had witnessed. When Machiavelli wrote in chapter 17 of The Prince that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both, he was addressing a hard political reality. He understood that people are fundamentally ungrateful, fickle, false, and hungry for gain, ready to betray affection when it serves their interests. And if you want to go even deeper, to understand the real man behind the prince, his political rise, personal downfall, and the brutal events that shaped his worldview, I've made a full video just for that. Stay with me until the end, and I'll link it on the final screen so you can watch it next without missing anything here. It's a powerful complement to what you're about to discover. Now let's examine the full context of this statement, because context changes everything. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty as an end in itself. He was answering a specific question. How does a prince maintain power in a world where everyone wants to take it from him? His answer was pragmatic, not sadistic. Love, Machiavelli observed, is fragile because it's based on obligation and emotion, things that can break under pressure. When times are good, people are happy to support a benevolent leader. But when sacrifice is required, when resources are scarce, when the leader must make unpopular decisions, that love evaporates like morning dew. Fear, however, is anchored in the dread of punishment, a far more reliable motivator for obedience. Fear doesn't depend on good feelings or positive circumstances. It operates independently of emotion, creating a consistent behavioral constraint. But, and this is the crucial point that most people miss, Machiavelli was absolutely clear on one thing: fear should never become hatred. The prince must avoid being hated, he warned, because hatred leads to rebellion and downfall. This distinction is everything. Fear mixed with respect creates stability. Fear mixed with hatred creates revolution. Modern psychology has actually validated many of Machiavelli's observations about human nature. Studies in behavioral economics, social psychology, and organizational behavior consistently show that negative consequences are more effective at preventing unwanted behavior than positive reinforcements are at encouraging desired behavior. This is known as loss aversion. People are more motivated to avoid losses than to pursue equivalent gains. The fear of losing something, security, status, wealth, freedom, is a more powerful motivator than the promise of gaining something equivalent. Machiavelli understood this intuitively. 5 centuries before, behavioral scientists could measure it in laboratories. He also understood something else: the fundamental inconsistency of human loyalty. People promise eternal devotion when it costs them nothing. But when keeping that promise requires sacrifice, when it threatens their wealth, their comfort, or their safety, most people will break their word without hesitation. This isn't cynicism, it's observation. Machiavelli had watched armies desert their commanders, allies betray their partners, and subjects overthrow their beloved rulers the moment conditions changed. Love-based loyalty is conditional. Fear-based obedience is structural. Law 1. The dangerous balance between fear and love. Human nature is paradoxical. We crave connection, yet betray it when convenient. We desire freedom, yet need structure. We want benevolent leaders, yet respect only those who demonstrate strength. Machiavelli grasped this tension and advised all rulers to navigate it carefully. The ideal scenario, he acknowledged, is to be both feared and loved. But since human nature makes this combination rare and unstable, a leader must prioritize. Fear secures obedience by controlling the consequences of disobedience. It creates a predictable framework where people understand the boundaries and the costs of crossing them. Love secures loyalty, but only when conditions are ideal, which they rarely are in politics or leadership. Love requires continuous reinforcement, constant validation, and unwavering benevolence, even when circumstances demand tough decisions. Machiavelli's strategic insight: if you must choose, favor fear, but temper it with generosity and justice to prevent hatred. The key is calibration. Too much fear without any warmth creates resentment. Too much love without any consequences creates contempt. The master leader walks the tightrope between these extremes, adjusting constantly based on circumstances. Law 2. Why fear is a more reliable motivator. Historical and psychological evidence shows that fear creates consistent behavioral constraints. Traffic fines prevent speeding, prison sentences deter crime, social stigma modifies behavior, professional consequences ensure compliance with workplace standards. Fear of these outcomes leads to predictable patterns of behavior that can be relied upon to maintain order and stability. Love, however, depends on goodwill, which can be withdrawn when personal interests shift. An employee who loves their boss will still leave for a higher salary elsewhere. A citizen who loves their leader will still protest policies that harm their interests. A spouse who loves their partner will still file for divorce if the relationship becomes sufficiently toxic. Love is beautiful, but it's not a reliable foundation for institutional stability or consistent behavioral compliance. Machiavelli's conclusion reflected insights that wouldn't be validated by behavioral psychology for centuries. Fear is the stronger, more dependable lever to ensure obedience when obedience is necessary for survival. But, and this cannot be emphasized enough, Machiavelli was talking about institutional fear, not personal terror. He meant the fear of consequences built into systems of law and order, not the fear of arbitrary cruelty or unpredictable violence. Law 3. How to use fear without being hated. The line between effective fear and destructive hatred is razor thin, but it can be navigated. Machiavelli provides several guidelines. Be feared through respect and authority, not cruelty or injustice. Your subjects should fear the consequences of breaking rules, not fear your personal whims or sadistic tendencies. The fear should be of the system, not of you as an individual. Enforce consequences swiftly and transparently. When punishment is necessary, it should be immediate, proportional, and clearly connected to the offense. Nothing breeds resentment faster than arbitrary or delayed punishment that seems disconnected from any specific wrong. Avoid unnecessary cruelty. Save harsh measures for when they serve long-term stability. Machiavelli actually advocated for mercy whenever possible. Violence and punishment should be tools of last resort, not first instincts. When they are necessary, they should be decisive enough to prevent the need for repetition. Cultivate a reputation that commands respect beyond mere intimidation. The best form of fear is the kind that exists in people's minds without needing constant reinforcement. Your reputation should do the heavy lifting, making actual displays of power rarely necessary. Machiavelli used the example of Cesare Borgia, who was ruthlessly efficient in establishing order in Romagna. Borgia delegated the dirty work of initial pacification to a lieutenant, then publicly executed that lieutenant when the job was done, satisfying the people's desire for justice while establishing his authority. Brutal, yes. Effective, historically, yes. Law. 4. Modern interpretations and misconceptions. Popular culture has done Machiavelli a tremendous disservice. The term Machiavellian has become synonymous with ruthless manipulation, backstabbing politics, and amoral scheming. But scholars and historians emphasize his nuanced approach. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for evil. He was describing reality and providing a survival manual for leaders who wanted to maintain stability in genuinely dangerous circumstances. Fear without prudence alienates and destroys. We've seen this throughout history. Tyrants who relied solely on terror eventually faced rebellion and violent overthrow. Stalin, Pol Pot, Saddam Hussein all created regimes of pure fear. And all ultimately fell or created successor states that repudiated their methods. Love without strength invites chaos. We've also seen this. Leaders who were too permissive, too lenient, too focused on being liked rather than being effective. They lost control, allowed disorder to spread, and ultimately failed to protect their people. Modern leadership borrows from Machiavelli's balance, even if it doesn't acknowledge the source. Effective authority requires tough decisions wrapped in fairness, reliability, and strategic vision. Think about effective managers in corporations. They're not cruel, but they enforce deadlines and performance standards. They're not cold, but they make difficult decisions about terminations when necessary. They seek to be respected, not necessarily loved, because respect creates results. Law 5. Lessons from history's princes. Real historical examples illuminate Machiavelli's principles in action. Augustus Caesar transformed himself from the ruthless Octavian, who defeated his rivals in civil war, into the revered first emperor of Rome. He was feared, his power was absolute, and his early career was marked by proscriptions and executions. But he was also respected for bringing stability, prosperity, and the Pax Romana. He balanced fear with institutional legitimacy, creating a system that lasted centuries. Elizabeth I of England developed a carefully calibrated public persona that balanced strength with grace. She could be ruthless when necessary, executing Mary Queen of Scots, crushing rebellions, sending enemies to the Tower. But she also cultivated an image of maternal care for her subjects. She was the Virgin Queen, married to England itself. She inspired loyalty that wasn't quite love, but was far more than simple obedience. Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady, projected uncompromising strength in her political decisions. She faced down striking coal miners, fought a war over the Falklands, and pushed through controversial economic reforms. She wasn't beloved, but she was respected and feared by her opponents. Her authority came from her willingness to make unpopular decisions and stand by them. Even modern figures who project confidence with calibrated toughness, business leaders like Steve Jobs, political leaders like Lee Kuan Yew, earned respect seldom possible through friendliness alone. They were demanding, sometimes harsh, but they delivered results that justified their methods. The practical application today. How does Machiavelli's wisdom apply to our modern world? More directly than you might think. In business leadership, the most effective executives aren't those who are loved by their teams, but those who are respected. They set clear expectations, enforce accountability, and make tough decisions when necessary. They're not cruel, but they're not afraid to fire underperformers, reject bad ideas, or push back against resistance. In parenting, the most effective parents balance warmth with clear boundaries. Children need to know that consequences are real and consistent. Permissive parenting that prioritizes being liked over being respected often produces entitled, undisciplined children. In personal relationships, the healthiest dynamics involve mutual respect more than infatuation. Relationships built purely on emotional intensity often collapse when that intensity fades. Relationships built on respect, boundaries, and clear expectations tend to endure. In politics, leaders who prioritize approval ratings over making necessary but unpopular decisions often fail to accomplish anything meaningful. Leaders who are willing to be temporarily unpopular in service of long-term goals often leave lasting legacies. The ultimate lesson: power requires managing human nature. Machiavelli didn't glorify cruelty. He revealed that power requires managing human nature, not ignoring it, not wishing it were different, but accepting it as it is and working within those constraints. The phrase, "It is better to be feared than loved," encapsulates a truth about securing order and loyalty in a world where human fidelity can never be taken for granted. It's not a celebration of fear. It's a realistic assessment of what works when stakes are high and resources are scarce. The real secret is mastering the art of commanding fear without tipping into hatred, and balancing justice and mercy to maintain power that lasts. This requires several things. Self-awareness, understanding your own motivations and tendencies toward either excessive harshness or excessive leniency. Situational awareness, reading the circumstances and calibrating your approach accordingly. Sometimes firmness is required, other times mercy is strategic. Long-term thinking, understanding that burning bridges, creating enemies, and generating resentment may solve short-term problems while creating long-term disasters. Emotional intelligence, distinguishing between respect-based fear and hatred-based fear, and knowing how to cultivate the former while avoiding the latter. The deeper truth: perception shapes reality. Machiavelli understood something profound about human psychology. Perception matters more than reality. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, he wrote. Everyone sees what you appear to be, few really know what you are. This means that your reputation, your public image, your perceived capabilities, these matter more than the technical details of your character or methods. A leader who is secretly kind but publicly weak will be exploited. A leader who is secretly uncertain but publicly confident will be followed. This isn't about deception. It's about understanding that humans respond to signals and symbols as much as to substance. Your authority must be visible and credible, not hidden behind closed doors. 5 centuries after Machiavelli wrote The Prince, his insights remain shockingly relevant. Human nature hasn't changed. The dynamics of power haven't fundamentally altered. The tension between idealism and pragmatism continues. We live in an age that often rejects Machiavellian thinking as cynical or outdated. We want to believe that authenticity, kindness, and good intentions are enough to succeed in leadership. We want to believe that if we're just good enough, people will naturally follow us. But reality repeatedly teaches us otherwise. Effective leaders, whether in business, politics, families, or communities, understand that respect is more valuable than affection, that boundaries are more important than approval, and that sometimes tough decisions are necessary even when they're unpopular. Machiavelli's wisdom isn't about being cruel. It's about being effective in a world where resources are limited, interests conflict, and human reliability cannot be assumed. The phrase, "It is better to be feared than loved," is not a manifesto of tyranny. It's a pragmatic observation about maintaining order and achieving objectives when you cannot guarantee loyalty through emotional bonds alone. Master this balance, command respect through strength while avoiding hatred through justice, and you'll understand what Machiavelli was really teaching. Subscribe to master the ruthless clarity that guides true power, and to explore the timeless wisdom that separates effective leaders from merely popular ones.